All right, let's get right into it. We all know our data is being used, right? It's how Netflix knows you'll love that new series, how your social media feed feels like it's reading your mind, and how language apps somehow become weirdly addictive. But that's just scratching the surface. Today, we're going to look past all that and dive into the powerful, unseen ways data is making huge, high-stakes decisions that are shaping not just our opportunities, but our entire reality.
So let me ask you a question. When you think about your personal data being used, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it those ads for sneakers that follow you around the internet? Or maybe a perfectly curated playlist that just gets you? Yeah, it's really easy to think of it in those simple terms. But what if I told you that's just the tiny, visible tip of a massive iceberg? The real action, the stuff that really matters, is happening way down below in places you'd probably never expect.
In this slide right here, it perfectly illustrates that iceberg. Above the water, you've got the stuff we see every day, the things designed for our convenience, our entertainment. But down below, in the deep, cold water, there's this whole invisible system of judgment at work. Algorithms are quietly calculating things like criminal risk scores that can actually influence a prison sentence. They're deciding if you're eligible for a loan, or even sorting through job applications before a single human being ever lays eyes on them. And let's be clear, these aren't just suggestions. These are decisions with massive real-world consequences.
And that gets us to the real heart of the matter. We're living in an age of new automated scorekeepers. Powerful algorithms are more and more acting as the judges in really critical parts of our society. And they often do it without any transparency or any way for us to appeal. Let's look at a real-world story to see exactly how this plays out.
This is Brisha Borden. When she was just 18 years old, she and a friend did something really dumb. They took a kid's bike and scooter that were just sitting outside. It was a mistake, and they got arrested for petty theft. The total value of the items? $80. A pretty minor crime, you'd think. But what happened next wasn't just decided by a human judge. It was decided by an algorithm. You see, the court used a piece of software to generate something called a recidivism risk score. Basically, it's a prediction, a calculated guess of how likely someone is to commit another crime down the road. In Brisha Borden's case, the algorithm spit out its answer, high risk. Around the same time, another man arrested for a much more serious crime was labeled low risk by the same software. As it turns out, that algorithm's judgment was deeply, deeply flawed.
And this right here gets to the fundamental problem. These predictive systems, they're not magic. They're trained on historical data. And where does that data come from? Our justice system, our education system, our child welfare system, all of which, let's be honest, have decades of human bias baked right in. So when you feed biased data into an algorithm, it doesn't magically fix it. Nope, it learns the bias, it automates it, and it scales it up, often creating what is basically digital racial profiling. A major investigation by ProPublica into these risk scores found a really staggering disparity. I mean, just look at this chart. The algorithm was way more likely to be wrong about black defendants. They were almost twice as likely as white defendants to be incorrectly flagged as being higher risk. And on the flip side, white defendants were much more likely to be labeled low risk and then go on to commit more crimes. Here's the most important part. The algorithm doesn't just fail, it fails differently depending on your race. And believe me, this automated scoring isn't just happening in the courtroom. It is spreading everywhere. Algorithms are screening your resume for a job, setting your insurance premiums, deciding if you get that car loan, and even flagging families for potential child welfare investigations. Every single one of these systems runs the risk of repeating the exact same kinds of biases we just saw.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. This isn't just about a bunch of individual scores. This is about how these systems, when you put them all together, are literally becoming the architects of our social reality. And in the process, they're concentrating an incredible amount of power and control.
This quote just nails it. It really captures the sheer scale of this shift. We're watching the rise of a totally new kind of power, one that doesn't rely on armies or ships, but on controlling information and digital infrastructure. This has led some smart people to start calling this phenomenon data colonialism.
So what exactly is data colonialism? Well, think of it like this. A few massive corporations and states, mostly from the global north, now control the digital platforms and infrastructure that basically the entire rest of the world uses. They pull immense value from the data of billions of people, but often leave very little benefit or control behind. It's creating this new form of economic dependence, and it's really undermining the ability of countries to control their own digital futures. And the impact of this new architecture is huge. It sorts us all into our own little filter bubbles, creating these alternate realities where we don't even share a common set of facts anymore. And of course, that kind of environment is the perfect breeding ground for misinformation. But there's something more subtle happening too. One paper called it anticipatory conformity. It's that feeling when you hesitate before you Google a sensitive health question or pause before you like a controversial post because you know someone or something is watching and taking notes. We start to change our own behavior just in case.
But, and this is a really important but, this isn't some dystopian story where we're all doomed. That's not it at all. All around the world, there's a growing pushback. People, communities, even entire governments are starting to challenge this new reality and are working to recapture some form of digital freedom.
A massive example of this is the European Union's AI Act. It's a landmark piece of legislation. It basically takes a risk-based approach, which this table lays out pretty clearly. For systems with unacceptable risk, things like government social scoring or predictive policing of individuals, they're just banned, outright. For high-risk systems, like the ones used in hiring or for loans, they're allowed, but with very strict rules. And even for minimal risk things, like a chatbot, there has to be transparency. You have to know you're talking to an AI. It's a huge attempt to set a global standard for how to do this responsibly.
Now, top-down regulation like that is a huge step forward, for sure. But it's not the whole story. It's only one piece of the puzzle. Real, lasting change also has to come from the bottom up. We have to create a more informed, more critical citizenry. And that all starts with education.
And a really cool example of this is happening in Pennsylvania. They've developed this information literacy toolkit that builds these skills right from the ground up. It starts in kindergarten, teaching the basics. It gives students and their families actual tools for fact-checking, and most importantly, it embeds critical thinking about sources and bias into all subjects, not just one computer class once a week. The whole point is to create savvy, thoughtful digital citizens.
And this resistance is taking so many other forms too. We're seeing countries like India build their own public digital infrastructure, designed to serve citizens, not just corporate shareholders. We're seeing nations team up on regional privacy rules. And you have grassroots activists on the ground fighting for things like community-owned networks and what they call digital sovereignty. These are all different attempts to build a better, more equitable digital future. So ultimately, it feels like we're at a crossroads. The very same technologies that can be used for control can also be used for empowerment and connection. The systems we are building right now are going to define the next chapter for all of us. And that leaves us with a really fundamental question we all have to think about. As our lives get more and more tangled up with these incredibly powerful systems, what does freedom truly look like?